Right now on Horse Center, Matt, we got Catholic Boy, Abel Tasman, Elate, Promises Fulfilled, Whitmore. A lot of big races to talk about from last week.
Yeah, Brian, some great performances at Saratoga, and let's talk about how they are probably going to impact the Breeders' Cup races.
Breeders' Cup races. We should talk about what's happening Saturday at Saratoga too, Matt. The Woodward. We're also going to talk about a showdown of special-looking 2-year-olds. Watch it all now right here on Horse Center. Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the great pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. Kind of amazing that we're heading into the final weekend at the big meets at Del Mar and Saratoga.
Summertime is rolling out quickly, Matt. The heat, though, still remains here in Kentucky and I guess out east as well. Speaking of hot, let's get to some hot racing action from last week. Of course, the big one was the Midsummer Derby, Saratoga's signature race. Full field of 3-year-olds looking to make their mark after Justify's retirement. Good Magic was the favorite, Matt, but it wasn't so good for Good Magic, and it looked like Good Magic was in trouble to me anyway, headed into the first turn.
Yeah, it sure did. It was certainly a race that was not run the way a lot of people expected. To me, it was a really strange race. The horses like Good Magic and Gronkowski and Wonder Gadot, they just came up really empty. And as it turned out, our old friend Mendelssohn showed up big, got sent to the lead and set the pace with Catholic Boy right behind. And that was it pretty much, Brian. The rest of the field was a no-show. Bravazzo put in his usual nice run to get a piece of it. And then Catholic Boy took control of the race and was ultra impressive.
Absolutely. It was an impressive performance. On the other hand, I wonder now if these 3-year-olds beating each other in these different races shows us a little bit of lack of overall quality now that Justify's gone. Maybe not. The winner was impressive, and I'm not going to take anything away from him. The 3 horses that I was betting with some odds, Bravazzo, King Zachary, and Vino Rosso, actually rallied for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. But it was a 2-horse race, as you said, Matt. Mendelssohn showed talent despite some missing of training, going back and forth. Ran a very good race, but this really was Catholic Boy's true coming out party. Graded stakes winner on both on turf and dirt at 2, and now a Grade 1 winner in his last 2 races, both at 1.25 miles, mind you, but on turf and dirt in $1 million races. So Catholic Boy is a fun horse in that he's so good on both surfaces. We weren't sure. I wasn't sure. I knew he was a danger, but I wasn't sure he was as good on dirt as turf. But I think the Travers really dispelled that belief.
Yeah, personally, I go back to the Derby Trail and early in the winter, early in the spring, and I had Catholic Boy very, very high on my list on the Derby Trail, and then, like so many people, when he bled in the Florida Derby and was off the Derby Trail, we kind of forgot how much we liked the horse at one point, and I plead guilty to that.
Yeah, Catholic Boy, you throw out the Florida Derby in which he bled, which was on a track that may not be his cup of tea, Gulfstream Park. Of course, Audible and Hofburg were easy 1-2 in that race. But Catholic Boy certainly had an excuse. You draw a line through that race, and his dirt form is very good. He couldn't get by Flame Away earlier in the year in the Sam F. Davis, but that was a good performance, finishing ahead of Vino Rosso. By the way, Matt, Vino Rosso, no more Vino Rosso for me in big races. He's just not... He's just not that type of horse, I guess. Maybe we both stuck with him too long. But getting back to the winner, Matt, I love him at 10 furlongs, obviously. You don't have to hit me over the head more than twice to see that this horse is just top quality at 1.25 miles. My question is he a real threat in the Breeders' Cup Classic? And I think they've already said it, but I don't think they have any choice but to point for the Classic. That's just a much bigger race than anything else that he could run on Breeders' Cup Day.
I agree with that, Brian. It's a bigger race. It's a bigger purse. And from top to bottom, maybe not as tough a race as he would find if he went in the Breeders' Cup turf.
Yeah. I don't know if it's an easier field than the Breeders' Cup turf. We don't know, of course, what European impact will be in the Breeders' Cup turf. 1.25 miles for a 3-year-old might be a little easier than 1.5 miles, but I don't know. I'm not ready to say that the Breeders' Cup Classic is an easier race for him, but it's certainly a much bigger race and one that can really set his career apart from everybody in his generations, other than Justify, of course. Mendelssohn is a talented horse. We've known it, Breeders' Cup, Juvenile Turf, Dubai World Cup. He had some hiccups along the way, but as the guys on NBC were saying Saturday, we have every reason to believe Mendelssohn will get better next time or the next 2 times. So another horse who's a threat. I'm not sure if they beat the older horses in there. I think I like Catholic Boy just because of the 10 furlongs and how gritty and how determined and he can really run a tactical race at 1.25 miles, which is nice to see. But they'll be in with a shot against the older horses, and as we said, the older dirt horses are not the best in the world.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. I'm not sure with Mendelssohn. I think with Mendelssohn, I kind of feel like he might be better on the turf, but that's not the direction they're going with him. Like you said, the Breeders' Cup Classic is a bigger race, etc. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, right now, I think Accelerate is the horse to beat as we're looking ahead to the Breeders' Cup Classic off of this important race in the Travers. But certainly Diversify, Catholic Boy, West Coast should be back soon. Maybe Collected, who ran a good Breeders' Cup Classic last year. And there's other older horses, some of them running this weekend at Saratoga, who could go there. But right now, Accelerate's the top of my list, but Catholic Boy moved up quite a bit with this performance in the Travers. While the Travers was the headliner of the day, Matt, at Saratoga on Saturday, of course, there was a gigantic card that day. And I think the most interesting race, as it maybe looked beforehand and then as it played out on paper, was a rematch of Abel Tasman and Elate, who ran a great race in the Coaching Club American Oaks last year. They did it again on Saturday.
They sure did. And like you said, Brian, it was a race where it appeared to be a 2-horse race, and that's exactly how it played out. They went at it again, Elate and Abel Tasman. They switched positions on the track this time. Elate was on the outside. Abel Tasman was on the inside. But once again, they battle it out. They battle it out head to head. They battle it out body on body. And once again, there was controversy at the finish. The inquiry sign went up. They looked at it for a long time, but there was no change. They did not take down Mr. Baffert. They did not take down Mr. Smith, and the finish stood.
Yeah, and the connections of Elate, Matt, were not too happy. I don't know if it's a cumulative effect from what happened in the Coaching Club of American Oaks, where she really was pinned and pushed on the rail by Abel Tasman, but the connections after the race of the runner-up, Elate, who was only making her second start of the year, were definitely a little upset that there was no action by the stewards.
Yes, and I think it was probably a cumulative effect in there, and I can understand their frustration because both years there was significant contact between the horses. A lot of people saying this year that Abel Tasman lugged out under left-hand hitting from Mike Smith. but they were also saying that Elate was lugging in, so it was in that instance no harm, no foul. I don't know. I'm not convinced about that. If you're asking me who got the worst of the bumping, I think it was Elate in there. But to me, the stewards' decisions should be more along those kind of lines. They shouldn't involve the element of, well, I don't think Elate was ever going to get by. Once you start bringing that subjective element into it, it seems to me that the decisions are a little hard to figure out.
Yeah, and getting to my opinion on that, Matt, I wasn't big on taking Abel Tasman down in this race. I could have easily seen her come down. But two really good horses battling it out. I do think Elate got the worst of it, and I do think they would have been closer than the neck that separated them at the finish of this personal ensign. But on the other hand, I think Abel Tasman deserved the win, and I kind of think that she would have won by a nose, maybe, if there wasn't a little bit of bearing out into Elate in the stretch. Let's get away from the controversy. Let's get into the race themselves, because I think these two really did separate themselves. We're talking about another very interesting, as has become commonplace in recent years, another very interesting Breeders' Cup distaff starting to assemble as we get closer to early November at Churchill Downs. And I think these two really did separate themselves, because Farrell and Wildcat, the South American, they were 1-2 in a previous stake at Saratoga, and just no match for these two. Unique Bella, of course, was retired. Elate and Abel Tasman have been top notch now for a long time, and I think they proved again that there's some really good 3-year-old fillies out there, but these two are going to take some serious beating come Breeders' Cup time.
That I agree with a lot, Brian. And just elaborating on that a little bit, so much talk about the 3-year-old filly division led by Monomoy Girl and Wonder Gadot and Red Ruby and Eskimo Kisses, all terrific horses. But you know what, Brian? I think that Abel Tasman and Elate are a step above those, not just the other older fillies and mares. I think they're a step above the 3-year-old fillies also, and it's going to be tough for them to beat both of those horses in distaff.
Yeah, and when we're talking 3-year-old fillies, Matt, of course, we're talking first and foremost about Monomoy Girl, who's been undefeated in top-notch racing all season long for trainer Brad Cox. And actually, the Breeders' Cup distaff, the future wager, came out, as well as the Classic. Accelerate was the choice in the Classic. Monomoy Girl was actually a slight favorite. No surprise there. This kind of year she's having was a slight favorite over Abel Tasman. Elate was back at the third choice. If I had to pick one to win the distaff right now, Matt, and I said this before the personal ensign, it would be Elate. Now, I'm not crazy for the recent trend of our best older dirt mares to run so infrequently, but Forever Unbridled made that popular last year, and now Abel Tasman's had 3 races all year. Elate's only had 2. But I understand it. They're pointing for just big races, and they're pointing specifically for the Breeders' Cup distaff, although we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I'm of the opinion that Monomoy Girl only sits third on my ladder of Breeders' Cup distaff, if that's in fact where everyone goes. Now, Bill Mott, who was a little bit, as we talked about, disappointed that there was nothing done after the personal ensign, realizes that Elate is a distance horse, and maybe realizes that the Breeders' Cup Classic is not going to be one of the strongest. There's no gun runner this year. There's no Inform Arrogate or California Chrome. So he's talking about Elate as a possible Classic entry, Matt.
Right, and I think what you're emphasizing there, Brian, is the difference in the distance between the Classic and the distaff.
Yeah, 10 furlongs, I would like Elate even more over Monomoy Girl and Abel Tasman both. So it's interesting. You take the easier road, which is not so easy, facing Monomoy Girl, Abel Tasman, and more in the distaff at 9 furlongs. But at 10 furlongs, you probably get a better distance for a late, and maybe a classic that is opened, has an open door for somebody to pop in and upset. And I tell you what, a late makes a lot of sense, despite the fact that we saw Wonder Gadot kind of fail in her attempt at 10 furlongs against the Boys and the Travers.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea that Bill Mott has put out there, something that we'll keep track of certainly as we head to November.
Yeah, and bottom line, folks, from this personal instant, we're looking a lot towards the Breeders' Cup as we get closer. But bottom line from the personal instant, I think Matt and I both agree that Abel Tasman and Elate are two outstanding older mares. They've been really top-notch fillies since their debuts back a couple years ago, and it's really nice to see how good they are and a rivalry. Unfortunately, for Elate, Abel Tasman is now 3 up on the rivalry, 3-0. They finished 2nd and 4th in last year's Breeders' Cup Distaff. I think both are even better this year, and I still like Elate a little bit to turn the tables at some point. Catholic Boy, the huge matchup in the personal instant were the two biggest takeaways from Saturday, but we got to talk sprinters, Matt, because these sprinters, the Breeders' Cup Sprint is looking like it's going to be a really good one, and we saw some more good ones Saturday. Let's start with the 3-year-old Promises Fulfilled for Dale Romans, doing it again at Saratoga.
Yeah, Brian, Dale Romans had a huge day in the Allen Jerkins. Not only did Promises Fulfilled back up his performance earlier in the meeting, but he uncorked another phenomenal performance, and Romans got the exacta with 7 Trumpets cutting back in distance and looking really good to come in second.
Yeah, maybe 7 Trumpets will be a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile horse for Dale Romans. Although, for me, this was all about the winner, Matt. I'm glad that you used such glowing terms on the performance, because I just thought it was huge. He was pressured early in the race. The second quarter was crazy fast. They did 44 through a half mile, Promises Fulfilled did. And then quickly, after he put away the horse that he had to deal with early on, Engage engaged him. Engage didn't want to wait so long after the last one. So Engage took him on, and Promises Fulfilled just shook him off. And, Firenze Fire was making a little bit of a wide move, but he really wasn't gaining for a lot of the stretch, and he came running late. But Promises Fulfilled, this was one of the better, and maybe it doesn't look so just eyeballing it, but if you put all the pieces together, I think, and going 7 furlongs, I think this was a huge performance. He's clearly gotten, the son of Shackelford has gotten to be one of the best sprinters in the country, and I do think he can beat older horses when the Breeders' Cup Sprint rolls around.
I agree with that, Brian. At Saratoga this summer, each one of these big sprint races have produced some phenomenal performances, and that's why we're both kind of really excited about the Breeders' Cup Sprint this year.
Yeah, there are a lot of good ones out there, and Promises Fulfilled might be the only 3-year-old that can compete with so many good older sprinters, but I'm here to tell you he can compete. He looks that good right now. And Firenze Fire, he's worth mentioning, Matt, coming off that huge win where he just bombed Mendelssohn and the rest, 7 Trumpets and the rest in the Dwyer. He was running late, and if this had been a mile, I think he surely would have been a lot closer to the winner. So Firenze Fire continues to point himself out as a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile contender.
And at Churchill this year for the Dirt Mile, it's going to be a 1-turn Dirt Mile this year,
which I think is good for Firenze Fire. So yeah, nice performance, comeback performance off that big Dwyer win. Then, Matt, we had the Forego, and the best older sprinter at Saratoga this year, hands down for me, was Imperial Hint and what he did earlier in the year. But no Imperial Hint this time. The Forego is always good, and it was again this year. We had a rematch of Whitmore and Limousine Liberal, who have locked horns now a few times. And we also had the favorite coming from California, City of Light. It was an interesting stretch run, Matt.
Yeah, it was, Brian. And Whitmore just unleashed just really strong performance. It was 7 furlongs. It was a 7 furlong sprint day at Saratoga, and in the past, Whitmore had most of his success going 6 furlongs, but he's just such a neat older horse at this point to come up with a performance like that. I think they kept him a little bit closer to the pace this time, didn't get quite as far behind, which was probably a smart move considering the way the track was playing. Horses weren't coming from really far back, and Whitmore adapted really well to being asked to stay a little bit closer and just and gave that field a whooping.
A whooping, yes, Matt. But I think we're missing probably the most vital part of this race, the most vital component of this race, and that's the trip. The trip handicapper, like myself, will look at this race and really give a lot of credit to second place City of Light and third place Limousine Liberal, because certainly Whitmore gained a bunch of lengths by the trip he got. And it's interesting because Limousine Liberal was drawn on the 1 hole, but Whitmore was ahead of him early, and Whitmore was the one that controlled things down on the rail. Limousine Liberal shifted way wide, and if similar trips, I have my serious doubts whether Whitmore was a winner of this race. I'm with you, by the way. Whitmore's put together a wonderful sprinting career, and with speed ahead of him, he is a threat. He's stabled at Churchill Downs, and a horse to watch out for, and a really nice horse that I'm glad got his first Grade 1 win. But on the other hand, Limousine Liberal, I think, was lost more ground than he lost the race by. And you probably say the same about City of Light. Moving forward, Whitmore, Limousine Liberal, Matt, Breeders' Cup Sprint, threats. We've said it all year. They remain threats, especially I think this is a year where we might see that 43 and change early fraction in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And both of those good, older, veteran sprinters are capable of picking up the pieces at Churchill Downs this fall. City of Light, to me, this was a nice race coming out of a long race last time, 10 furlong race last time. It seemed to me the perfect kind of prep for a horse who could be one of the ones to beat in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
Yeah, and then there's always the mind your biscuits question out there too, Brian. Is he going to be in the sprint? Is he going to be in the Dirt Mile? Is he going to go in the Classic? And as I mentioned before, that aspect in there that the Dirt Mile's one turn makes these decisions even more intriguing.
Yeah, so out of these 2 sprint races, the Forego and the Alan Jerkins Memorial here, Promises Fulfilled, it moved up to right near the top for me, Breeders' Cup Sprint. Whitmore, Limousine Liberal did what they were doing all year, but Firenze Fire, City of Light, 1 turn, Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, big contenders there. Mind Your Biscuits, which way does he go? As you said, Roy H., the defending champion, Ransom the Moon, obviously Imperial Hint. These are looking to be exciting races, and Saturday only piqued my interest for both Breeders' Cup races. Hey, Matt, Saturday's big race this week is the Grade 1 Woodward. Of course, the Woodward, I remember when Forco dominated this race back in our earlier years, Matt. The Woodward has a wonderful history. It's been at Saratoga for several years, and tell you what, it's making its own new history at Saratoga. Frankly, this year's edition is, if you're looking for superstars like Gunrunner's 10-length win last year on his march to superstardom, you're not going to find it in this year's Woodward. But we do have 14 horses, Matt, which pretty much guarantees no heavy favorites in here. Gunavera, I think, will be the chalk, but let's talk about this field a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, Brian. If you're one of those handicappers that's always looking for big fields and wide open fields, then open up your past performances, because you're going to love the Woodward. And I agree. I was going to say the same thing. There's no gun runner in here. This is a Woodward field that, interestingly, in their past performances, there's only 3 horses that are Grade 1 winners. There's a bunch of horses in the race that made their presence briefly on the Derby Trail last year and the year before. So lots of familiar names in there, but our old friend Gunavera is returning. And Brian, I think you feel will be the likely favorite in there. We know Gunnevera likes Saratoga. One of his best performances last year happened at Saratoga in the Travers when he unleashed his big closing move to beat everybody in the field except for West Coast.
Yeah, Gunnevera, actually, it's an interesting pattern, Matt. As you know, he's stabled down in South Florida with Antonio Sano, one of the nicest guys in racing. And each summer, he's prepped down there in South Florida, and he's come up to Saratoga. 2 years ago, Saratoga Special, he just blew by recruiting ready late in that one. Then last year, he ran a big Travers. West Coast was able to get a breather a little bit in the race, and he found a second gear to repel Gunnevera late. But Gunnevera really was in a large, solid field in last year's Travers. Gunnevera was clearly second best. Now he comes to Saratoga for the third time. Prep at Gulfstream Park was nice after a slight injury in Dubai and a layoff. So Gunnevera, I think he's the one to beat. I know he's the favorite. I think he's the one to beat in here, the most likely horse. And part of that is he likes Saratoga, but also he's got a lot of class. I do think we need to talk about Seeking the Soul, who's a well-bred Fipke horse for Dallas Stewart, who just keeps getting better and better. And he showed his class. He's one of those Grade 1 winners. He showed his class last fall, both just romping in a Keeneland allowance and then, of course, winning the Clark late last year. So Seeking the Skull, surprised at the morning line. He's a little bit higher, but certainly another threat in here, Matt. And I think that don't be confused by that losing prep at Indiana. That was a good prep, a good way to set him in the right direction for the Woodward.
I agree with that, Brian. That prep race at Indiana was a very Dallas Stewart kind of move where clearly Dallas has been thinking about the Woodward here, thinking that maybe the field is going to be kind of the way it turned out, and Seeking the Soul is certainly a big threat in there. Then we have to talk about other horses. Taprit, for instance, there's another one of the Grade 1 winners. Hasn't won a race since the Belmont Stakes last year. His performances this year have been, to me, a little bit of head scratchers in there. I don't think I'm a big fan of Taprit in there. Also, we should talk about Sunny Ridge, the New Jersey bred, one of those horses that appeared briefly on the Derby Trail, who had a very nice prep race at Belmont Park. In the state dinner.
Yeah, Sunny Ridge is a nice horse. I don't know if he ever wins a race quite like this. Sunny Ridge, I like him. Jersey bred, what's not to like? But this is a tough spot. Maybe he's close early and runs a big race, but we'll see. Yeah, Taprit, he's 0 for 4 since he won the Belmont. Decent enough Travers, and then 3 mediocre, not terrible type of races this year. He's been running into Diversify lately, and maybe this provides a little class release for Taprit. Certainly a threat, but I'm not going to bet him either. Patch, popular horse for Todd Pletcher, the one-eyed wonder Patch. He'll need a fast pace, 9 furlongs at Saratoga. If there is a fast pace, maybe he makes a move, but another horse I can't really get on. Yoshida, we haven't mentioned Yoshida, Grade 1 winner on turf, who has not run on dirt yet. So this is his dirt debut. A lot of horses have succeeded in the last few years at Saratoga going turf to dirt. Although Catholic, the most recent one, Catholic Boy, certainly had good dirt form before. So it'll be interesting to see Yoshida, grandson of, is he a grandson or a great grandson? He's Sunday Silence blood, one way or the other. It'll be interesting to see if he can make his move on dirt. I think he'll get bet a little bit, and I don't know if he's worth the risk from a handicapping standpoint. But obviously, they feel like he's got a little bit of ability to handle the dirt to try his first dirt race in the Grade 1 Woodward.
Yeah, it doesn't, and we should also throw in that it doesn't look like there's a lot of speed in this race, which should make it interesting. I also want to mention Term of Art in there, who has been switched to the barn of Brad Cox from Doug O'Neill, and looks like might be getting a little bit better in there also. But for me in the Woodward, my pick is going to be Seeking the Soul.
Yeah, Seeking the Soul makes a lot of sense. For me, I'm going with the favorite. Hopefully he's not a heavy favorite, Guinevere, but Seeking the Soul, I think, is the horse I fear the most. You mentioned Term of Art for Brad Cox. He's got two in here, and both are a little bit interesting, and they ran 1-2 last time at West Virginia. Kurlov, son of Looking at Lucky for Chad Brown, has been turf to dirt to turf to dirt a little bit. I wouldn't throw him out. Our old friend Hence is coming off a obscure stakes win. Not a huge fan of Hence, but on his day, he's a threat. Imperative, the old 8-year-old, runs big every once in a while. So there are a lot of options. You know, my long shot, Matt, was going to be Rally Cry. Rally Cry really ran big last summer at Saratoga, winning a minor stake nicely in fast time. And then he ran second to Gun Runner. It was a way back second, but it was second in this very race last year. But the 14 hole, I just don't know how much I can get behind a horse. 9 furlongs from the 14 hole, I think, is a tough spot for my long shot Rally Cry. So I'm sticking with Guinevere, my old friend Guinevere, on the thought that he loves Saratoga as much as anything. Matt, we were just talking about the Woodward. We failed to mention that a bunch of graded stakes that Saturday as well at Saratoga again this Saturday. And I think the Grade 1 Spinaway came up very interesting. Chasing yesterday is American Pharoah's little half-sister. Restless Rider just was so impressive last time in Churchill. And there's some interesting other horses in the race. So check out the Grade 1 Spinaway. Matt, you have any quick thoughts on the Spinaway?
It's a great race, Brian. Big field. Another one of the handicappers' delights. Full field. And it'll be interesting to see if Baffert can continue his success shipping out to Saratoga. Mike Smith is coming also to ride the horse.
Yeah, she'll get better, lad. I'm not big on her in this spot. Virginia Eloise, I believe, is her name. A horse who made up a lot of ground last time. Kind of like her in conjunction with Restless Rider coming from Kentucky. But who knows? Maybe American Pharoah's sister will turn out to be special. Her maiden win was nice. Speaking of turning out to be special, Matt, we're talking Del Mar Futurity now, which is Labor Day, holiday Monday. And I tell you what, the two most talked about 2-year-olds in the country so far, there's a few out there, but there's no doubt in my mind that the two most talked about 2-year-olds in the country have been Instagram from the barn of Jerry Hollendorfer and Roadster from the barn of Bob Baffert.
That's for sure, Brian. And with the history of 2-year-olds in California making an impact on the Derby Trail, these two are already getting a tremendous amount of hype. Las Vegas is offering Kentucky Derby future odds on these two already. It's interesting to me with the trend in the Kentucky Derby, with horses coming out much later in the last few years, the Derby winners. It's interesting to see if these relatively early, the old traditional, make their appearance in the summer 2-year-olds, the way it was for so many years, if these two are going to be around come May. But what a fantastic matchup. They are both terrific horses, and it'll be exciting to see them knock heads.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. It's been a few years, really, since really superstar 2-year-olds have carried it over into the Triple Crown, and that's what we saw, for, like you said, for years and years and years. So these two look awfully good to this point. Certainly Instagram, the son of Into Mischief, as I mentioned, out of the Jerry Hollendorfer barn. You know, Matt, you could have had him at the bargain price as a yearling for $190,000. That turned into $1.2 million as he started to show his ability on the track, purchased as a 2-year-old in training. He has the distinct advantage of experience over Roadster. He's had 2 races. He debuted a month earlier. He's run at 2 different tracks, and he's coming off a big win in the Best Pal. For that reason, I think he's probably the favorite and the one to beat in here, seeing what he's done in both of his starts. But on the other hand, Roadster, Bob Baffert, it's happened a lot lately, Matt, where Baffert is just coyly giddy, if you will. He has these little these little comments about, well, this is a good one, and Roadster is his early one this year. Son of Quality Road, he was purchased for over $500,000 as a yearling. He did not debut until July 29, which I guess these days is early, but the way he won that maiden race, Mike Smith just never really asked much at all, and he beat a big field for fun.
Yeah, Brian, and these days it's almost as important to be able to handicap your Bob Bafferts as to handicap the past performances. And like you said, Baffert was asked even before Roadster started if he had, after Justify won the Triple Crown, if he's got another one in the barn. And like you said, he at that point spoke about Roadster like he's a really good one. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and maybe I'm stirring the hyperbole pot just a little bit, Matt, but this is probably one of the strongest early matches we've had for 2-year-olds in years, because Instagrand and Roadster have looked that good, regardless of their inexperience, respectively, in 2 races and 1 race. They've looked that good. They've come attached with high price tags, big talk of them in the mornings, and they've certainly shown it on the track. So Instagrand, Roadster makes for a very interesting Del Mar Futurity. We don't know the field quite yet for the Del Mar Futurity on Monday, but with these 2 headlining, it's going to be must-watch racing. And hopefully, Matt, hopefully it's a really good meeting, and this is just the start of a really good rivalry, because these 2 truly could be any kind. All right, folks, as always, I appreciate, Matt and I appreciate greatly you tuning in every week to Horse Center. We're here having fun talking horses, and we love to see all the great comments that you give us. Thank you to our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel right here on Horse Racing Nation if you haven't already. Hey, Matt, it looks like our first horse in our partnership at Derby Day Racing is going to run. She's penciled in for a start September 20 at Churchill Downs, so that's exciting. But I wanted to break a little news as we're getting closer to closing this partnership, and there's still plenty of openings, and we're still deciding on our second colt for the partnership, which is coming definitely very soon. We're now open to a $10,000 buy-in rather than the original $20,000 buy-in, just trying to get a few more people involved in what we think will be a great and fun time.
I'm getting excited to see our filly making her first start. It's going to be on one of those Thursday nights at Churchill Downs. How exciting, Brian.
Good times ahead for us, Matt, and anyone who joins us here at Derby Day Racing. But for now, I want to say thank you again for watching Horse Center. Thank you to our great producer, Brett Workman, as always, for doing a great job with the show. Folks, we'll see you right here next week.